Good morning, everyone. Hi, it's Julia Yarbough with Keeping It Real Caregiving. Welcome to the very first Sunday coffee chat of 2024. Thanks for joining us this morning. And as you can see, we have three lovely faces on our screen this morning. So for today's show, first of all, I'd like to welcome all of you, and I want to say thank you to our guests. We have two special guests this morning. I'll give a brief introduction right now, and then we'll dive in. So joining us from the West Coast here in California is Heather Robert. Wave, Heather. Say hi.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we have Sid Starks joining us from the East Coast. So we're cross country this morning.
And good morning or good afternoon to you.
Excellent. All right. So both of you sit tight in our green room, as we call it. And I am going to give a little bit of housekeeping items this morning for those of you joining us. And thank you so much. So welcome again to Keeping It Real Caregiving's Sunday Coffee Chat and Support Show. Today's topic is caring for siblings, yourself, and your money. Those three items tend to go together because regardless of what type of care you're providing, you have to plan for caring for somebody else, making sure you're taking care of yourself in that process. You can't care for others if you're not caring for you. And then also thinking about what are the financial aspects of making all of this fit together and work. So a couple of housekeeping items. This is streaming on Streamyard to Facebook, hopefully, crossing fingers. There is a chat feature, so feel free to interact with us through the chat section. I also have us open on YouTube. If I'm able to look over at chats on YouTube, I will try to do that as well. And a couple of just news things that are happening in the world of caregiving that I'd like to share with you. As you know, I'm in California, and I share with everybody, I love my state. I love the fact that California is taking the lead and has taken the lead for the last several years for the master plan on aging. And basically, this is the leadership realizing that our population is aging. We have a very diverse population across backgrounds, racially, culturally, economically, urban, rural. The entire state looks different. How are we going to adapt to make sure that we are ready as our population ages? So I'd like to share with you some information from the MPA. And this may not be riveting reading for many of you, but I do want to share it because I think it's important to have that information for all of you. This is the Master Plan for Aging. I just put it into the chat, and I'm going to now share screen of the page. There we go. Master Plan for Aging Annual Report. I encourage all of you to glance through this, take a look, take a peek, see what's happening up and down the state. For those of you in other states, still take a look. If you are involved in your community, this is an excellent opportunity to understand what other regions are doing and how other legislatures are working to address the issue of an aging population. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We're making some great strides here in California. And I'm also happy to say, this is a little bit of a plug for myself, happy to say that Keeping It Real Caregiving takes part in a number of subcommittee groups for the Master Plan for Aging, one of which is the Aging, Equity and Aging and Disability Advisory Committee for the California Department of Aging's Master Plan for Aging. So very proud of that work. This is one of the reasons why I really encourage everybody to think about staying involved, sharing your stories, being an advocate. Even if you don't want to get involved, when I put out those calls for people to come forward with information, I can then take those stories, those real life experiences, and share them with the committee. So look for more on that. Also, want to share with you, and I'm going to move this back here for a moment. I want to share with you a new leading study out of California also. It's the first of its kind for the state, and it is a study that focuses on getting more information from the LGBTQIA plus community. So I want to share with you. Gotta love technology, folks. Too many screens here this morning. I'm going to add this up here. And there we go. Okay, there. I think that's right. So this is a study that is open through March. And again, I'm going to share this link with you as well so that you have this as a resource. I'm going to put that into the chat. Boom, there we go. Once you access that survey, it will feed through to see if you're eligible to take that survey. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Again, this is an area, a sub area of the aging population. We have to think about equity, inclusiveness, cultural awareness, and everybody ages. So this is a very unique research project. I encourage you to, if you are within that category, take this survey. If someone you know or love or that you care for is in this category, take this survey. California is leading the way. We want to hear from everybody. And finally, I want to share with you a news article that I came across just this past weekend. This isn't a plug for anybody. It's not a yes or no or right or wrong. It's just informational. But this is from the organization ProPublica, and it is a survey or an article that looks at some changes taking place within California and how the state and how the government, the Centers for Medicaid Services, CMS, oversees hospice care. I encourage all of you to take a look at that article. Again, it's not one way or the other. It's not political. It's not who's right, who's wrong. This is informational. I want you to really just open your eyes, take in as much information as you can. All right. So with that, I would like to dive into our topic at hand today. When we started, I mentioned that the title of today's show is Caring for Siblings, Yourself, and Your Money. And so I would like to focus a little bit and introduce you to our first guest, Heather Roberts. She has an incredible focus and desire to want to work with others in this space. So I'm just going to give you a little shout out here, Heather, because I'm incredibly impressed with your background. So folks, get this. Heather is currently a graduate student in the Masters of Social Work program at San Diego State University. All right, so that's just one thing. This is a completely new career path for her. She is focused on wanting to work on advocacy and policy changes. You've heard me talk a lot in the last couple of years on Keeping It Real Caregiving on how important it is that we get to the root issue of policy change. That's how we change the direction and the trajectory of what we do within caregiving. And so Heather has had a number of different jobs along the way. All of them have been within the field of helping others as a teacher in music and movement classes for children. She's volunteered with the volunteers as a baby cuddler at a local NICU. That's amazing, right? How many people take the time to go and do all of that? And in addition to all of that, she actually provided social engagement and interventions to help prevent and reverse delirium in older patients. Plus, she also volunteered a little bit at an assisted living rehab center. All right. So Heather, hats off to you. I'm giving you kudos and props. So thank you for joining us. And on a personal side, you are a family caregiver. Tell us who is in your circle that you're caring for, and why is it so important for you to now literally get a degree in this field and do even more amazing work?
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Um, so I am the sibling of a woman that has profound intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as some physical limitations. My sister Allison, um, and my mom is her primary caregiver, but I help out a few days a week to give my mom a break and also just to spend time with Allison. Um, I started my master's program thinking I actually wanted to do hospice and palliative care work. But as I went through my first semester and was learning more about policy work and lobbying and just sort of systemic change, I realized that that is the level I want to work at, rather than working directly with individuals. And it also became very obvious to me that family caregiving includes hospice and palliative care. It also includes caring for aging parents. It also includes taking care of children, and it also includes taking care of family members that have disabilities. It's all encompassing. It touches everybody. Um, all of us at some point in our life will either be a caregiver or be receiving care. So it's just such a huge category of people. So that's where I'm headed.
And so right now I have some photos up, and this is your sister Allison, right? She's your
Yes.
younger sister. And you mentioned both hospice care and palliative care, and I love that you mentioned that yes, care is all encompassing. So tell us a little bit about Allison and what you have learned in terms of what is necessary. And
Mm.
again, kudos to you for being so proactive and realizing that this is, you love your family, you love your sister, you love your parents, but you know that there's more work to be done. Tell us a little bit about this relationship and some of what you've learned within the caregiving space from taking care of your sister.
Yeah. So my sister is someone that needs full supervisory care, meaning she can't be left alone. She needs help with all of her daily activities, so very hands-on care. She needs her food prepared. She can feed herself, but she needs her food prepared and like set in front of her. She needs help bathing. She needs help dressing. She needs help getting up and out of chairs. She needs help toileting. All of those things. And I also experienced working with people that need that sort of level of care when I worked as a nursing assistant in a skilled nursing facility. So there's this day-to-day care, but then there's also outside supports that a family can get. So families are entitled to respite care, meaning that there's outside someone that can help take care of someone like my sister. So my mom can get a break because she's been caregiving. My sister's almost 50 years old. So most people, you have a child, you figure, through their young adult years, right? You're taking care of them. A lot of families have children that need lifetime care, and it's daunting. Trying to find good outside care is a challenge. My sister is in a community-based program that is supposed to provide enrichment and activity. She used to work on site at a retail store. She worked at a hospital doing sort of volunteer work that matched sort of her capacity, her capabilities. But over the years, the amount of time that she's out in the community has diminished. Before the pandemic, Monday through Friday, she was in her program for about 6.5 hours a day. Now it's maybe 4 hours. She's not working in a store anymore. She's not doing volunteer work. Those programs they've just sort of shut down. Another huge struggle that my family has, and I know this is common for people in our situation, is the inconsistency of care, the inconsistency of, they used to be called job coaches. We had one woman that worked with my sister for, gosh, I want to say like 3 years, and they had a good relationship, but now like every day it can be a different care provider coming to take care of my sister. And yeah, it's a struggle.
So when just hearing you say that in terms of that the care services have declined, that you recognize that your mom needs a break, and that you've stepped in as well. Do you feel that there has been enough awareness of this aspect of caregiving? And I have to say, I love that in our country, finally, the light is being shown on caregivers and family caregivers. What are some of the items that you think we need to think about, or that people need to understand, in addition to just the challenges that you're facing, of how prevalent this is, that it's not just maybe parents or aunts or uncles, that it is your siblings, and that this is impacting across the board?
Absolutely. One of the big challenges that people who are siblings of people that are going to need this lifelong care, my parents are 75 years old. My mom is an incredibly fit, active person, but 75, right? So over the next few years, her care needs are going to be increasing. And as her care needs increase, her capacity to take care of my sister will decline. So I'll go from being sort of like a part-time support person to being a caregiver for two people. And that is very, very common in this subcategory of caregivers. And it affects, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to ask you a question within that, and then I want to bring Sid in, because it's very similar of where we overlap on this. So as you look at your future, and clearly a caring person, you're working on your degree, you want to help the system, where do you fit into this in terms of being that focal point person for your sister and possibly your parents as they age? What are you thinking about in terms of making sure that your future is okay?
Right. So, it's interesting. So when I decided to go to grad school, I'm 50. I'm 51 now. So I'm embarking on this new career, knowing that I have this, I don't know, it's just sort of a leap of faith. I'm just going for it, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to work in this, but knowing that my caregiving responsibilities are going to play into my own future. I don't just make decisions for myself. I make decisions that are going to impact my availability to provide care for my sister. So this is something, again, wanting to work in policy and advocacy. Caregivers they're often women. There's this feminization of caregiving. Women already don't make as much money as men. And when you're a caregiver, a lot of times you are put in the position where you have to make a decision to maybe work part-time instead of full-time. Maybe you don't go for that promotion. My mom growing up was an attorney, but she never went for partner because there was no way she could be on partner track, where you have to be so focused on work and know that she had this full-time caregiving situation with my sister. So,
And
that's,
again, just hearing that, and we think about personal finances, preparing yourself and making choices that are paving the way, excuse me, for taking care of your family. Excuse me. Hate when that happens on television.
no problem.
Because we're talking about the financial aspect of this, I want to go ahead and bring in our second guest, Sid Starks. There you are. Thanks for joining us. And then we'll kind of loop around and just get into this conversation. So Sid, thank you again for joining us. And you too have been a family caregiver to your mother-in-law. Also looking at situations of helping other family relatives. When you hear Heather mention that she is making choices now to be able to pave the way for her own future and care for family members, as a family caregiver, tell us just a little bit about the experience you had, and how important it is that what Heather's doing now is really what we need to be thinking about.
Yes. Well, first, kudos to Heather, because you do realize that your life is changing and that you are a caregiver. One of the biggest things I know we experienced when my mother-in-law had her stroke was my father-in-law, the husband, I'm going to take care of my wife. Nobody else will. We have to look at the caregivers themselves to make sure that they stay healthy. And finally, Dawn, my wife, and her sister jumped in. They were helping out anyway, but it was a pattern where you saw that they were constantly fatigued. They were actually getting sick themselves. So what we finally decided was to go with outside help. And my family was able to get outside caregivers, which in itself, as I think you mentioned, Heather, finding the right fit oftentimes is the challenge in itself, because the caregivers often aren't paid very much. Oftentimes it is females. We did have a few males also, but you get into that where you build a personal relationship with the caregivers. With my mother-in-law's situation, and then they leave and you have to start all over. My mom herself, you mentioned changing careers. My sister with my mom, who passed away at 92, we noticed a pattern by being away from my mom, not being there all of the time. Once we saw my mom, we could tell that she was changing. And we started implementing procedures we thought that would help while she was still living alone by herself. We put in cameras so we could monitor her. And it helped a few times because she fell and no one was there. And we were monitoring the cameras throughout the day. But with my sister, she actually retired at an earlier age, in her mid-50s, just to be home with my mother. And then at some point with her, we said, it's too much. My sister was fatigued and not taking care of herself. So we did move her into a facility, my mom, which, you have to look around. You don't go with the first facility. Shop around. Preparing financially, it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. And we thought we were prepared. We were with my mom because we did estate planning before, when my dad died 20 years earlier. So my first thing is talk to some legal advice. Talk to an attorney, not just any attorney. Make sure it's an estate planning attorney or an elder care attorney. Also talk to a CPA. They often know the law better than anybody else as far as taxes and money. So I would start with consultation with an elder care attorney. Start with possibly a CPA also, because while we think we may know everything, again, there are so many surprises. Each day can be an adventure, things that you don't expect. And it's like, be as prepared as possible.
And I love that you say that, because since the day I started keeping it real caregiving, it has been about the idea that get prepared, plan and prepare, look ahead, because I thought I was prepared taking care of my mother. I thought I had taken care of all of the services and where we would live and how it would look. And I still had surprises. So as we talk about the legal aspects and the financial aspects, I want to loop back to you, Heather, because again, your focus is really looking at how you build your educational framework to then look at policy. Right now, on a professional level of what you're seeing, what is it that's the most frustrating about where we're at within our caregiving platform here in the States? What are some of the changes that we all can work towards? And again, I've shared this information in the past, but I want everybody to hear it. We just have to be repetitive with all of this. What are some things that you want to see happen that you can impact and affect within your field?
Oh gosh, there's so many ways to come at it. And I also want to say, I'm just about to enter my second semester in my grad school program, so I'm certainly no expert in the field yet. But from my personal experience, again, it's that sort of, there's a few things. So in terms of economic impacts, I'm encouraged that there seems to be, and again, during COVID, we all saw how much caregiving impacts people's ability to work. So there's a lot of movement in the business arena where people are trying to implement more caregiver-friendly policies so that people, don't have to, retire early. They don't have to leave their jobs in order to do full-time caregiving, because then that affects the job markets and the employment for people that need workers. doing non-caregiving work. So that is one area where there's some good movement, as Sid alluded to, finding care facilities and care workers that are a good fit for your loved one. Something needs to change there in terms of the way that we value care workers. The amount of pay that they get needs to go up. When I worked as a nurse assistant it was a skilled nursing facility, so I was working with people, mostly elderly people, of facing all different kinds of healthcare challenges. And on a good day, I would be responsible for 8 patients. One person for 8 patients, and I made a whopping $19 an hour. And it was incredibly physically taxing work. You're moving people around in the beds, and some days I'd be in charge of 10, 12, even 13 patients. And it's a system that is set up to fail for the people providing the care as well as the people receiving the care. It's a system that is designed to prioritize task efficiency and productivity rather than actual human caregiving and well-being. And it's money.
I want to jump in here real quick, Heather, and just to really reiterate what you're talking about. This is an item that I encourage anybody who may be thinking about having the need for a loved one being in a care facility. What you just said means that you, as the client and the advocate, you must ask the question, what is the staff to client ratio? You may get an answer that, oh, we've got enough people. That's not a good answer. You have to know what that ratio is, because otherwise your loved one may need help and care, and there's only one person. And that person who's working, everything in their heart, Heather, I'm sure you wanted to make sure you were there for every single person, every single moment they needed help, but you're one person. And Sid,
Yes.
I can dive in because I know you've
Yes.
experienced this.
And that's one thing. If you are in a facility, it's important that you watch over your loved one too, because you said the caregivers are often overworked, underpaid, while you may be taking care of 8 patients per day. It could be as many as 15. We ran into that a lot. And fortunately, with my position, my wife's position, we were able to actually stop in at various times during the day to make sure that, my mother-in-law had an allergy to peanuts. She was getting fed peanut butter sandwiches. It's like, no, you can't do that. So that's one thing. Even though they're in a facility, you still need to be there for them. That's one thing I can't emphasize enough. Also with that, even before they may actually, you start seeing the signs. I think I mentioned to you in an email, make sure loneliness can be the hardest thing ever. Being by yourself can lead to all these problems. So that's why, we're going through that with my father-in-law now. He's 85. He's to the point where he's still strong. He's still very sharp with his mind, but you see things slipping. Dawn is up there every morning. I try to swing by early in the afternoon with some excuse. How are you doing? He's one of those. It's like, why don't you go to the senior center? Be around people you know. His biggest thing, all they're going to do is complain about their health. And we sit there and chuckle. It's like, well, didn't you just get out of the hospital last week yourself? So still, that interaction is very important. So don't just push them aside. And I see that so often with people because it happens. I've had clients that a good friend of mine, his wife just passed away at age 54 from Alzheimer's, and the complications, and just watching him go through it, at least we were able to help him some, but you never know when this is going to happen. So don't take each day for granted. Be there every day.
Well put. That idea of being the personal advocate, so important. And I do want to share another personal story to piggyback off of what you just said of, pay attention to those cognitive declines and those changes. And I think you put it best when we were talking earlier, and you said, sometimes we may be too close to the family situation to see it, or we don't want to see it.
Right.
So
Yes.
again, I encourage all of you, if you even remotely are thinking that the person in your life that you love will need care. And statistically, that is going to be the case with all of us.
Yes.
Pay attention to those changes. Don't think, oh, mom or dad or aunt or uncle, or they're just having a bad day. No, pay close attention.
Yes.
Understand that this is part of your role. Be that advocate. To that point, I want to, we talk a lot about how as family members, we all start to just become this person who instantly has to be a caregiver. And how do we know what to do? So many programs like Keeping It Real Caregiving, other agencies all across the board that are doing such great work to educate people. But here's the rub, folks. You have to be open to receiving that information. You have to pay attention. You have to listen. I want to share, I'm going to pop up on screen a program here, again, in California. This is something called Cal Grows. And to Heather, your point of, our staff may not be paid a lot. What's their training? Are there enough? Are they valued? I'm going to put a link to this program in the chat as well. And this is an amazing resource that as a family caregiver, and you think, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help mom or dad sit up out of bed. I don't know how to transfer them. I don't know what the ADLs are. And for those who don't know, that's activities of daily living. These are all things that I want you to start thinking about. I want you to learn. I'm going to put the link to Cal Grows into the chat. This program allows you to actually go online, sign up, and get free training as a caregiver. Free. There's also a portal that if you are a professional caregiver and you work in a facility or you work for the state, there may be some options where you can get study credits and or be paid a small amount for your training. So again, Heather and Sid, you've both lived in this space. When you hear about programs like this, are we on the right track? Is this where we need to be going around the entire country so that there's this awareness that we need to value our care workers, have them well trained, have them supported, and make sure that folks know their value?
Absolutely. I think a program like this is really important because it's challenging to sort of try to figure out how to do all of these things on your own at home, especially if you are caring for someone that is newly in need of care. So like, in situations, someone who was probably pretty self-sufficient before then has a stroke, like that's a huge change, and it's physically demanding. It's hard, like moving other people's bodies around is a challenge. Like it takes some practice, and I think it's great that these things are available and that they're free. And I appreciate that you're spreading the word, because there are so many resources out there for caregivers, but a lot of times caregivers, we're so busy caregiving, we don't have time to look for the resources. But yes, things like this need to be amplified so people know where to find them.
Yes, I agree 100%. And the one thing I will stress is, while they're out there, you need to look at those services, but you should want to also, because you want to be as prepared as possible. As you mentioned earlier, Julia, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And as we get older, I mean, I'm dating myself, but I'm in my early 60s now. I think I mentioned my wife is turning 60. New Year's Day, we were in the hospital. We didn't start the day thinking that, but she had an event and she was in the hospital, and we thought, wow, this is starting the new year off right, but you never know when this is going to happen. That's the deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? And it's like, well, first get to the hospital. So, but we should want to be prepared on this, not needing, but wanting to be prepared, especially if you know that you have an aging parent or you have a sibling or a family member that needs some sort of care, because oftentimes it's the little things that can make a difference. Heather, you mentioned moving someone in and out of the bed. That's a big responsibility, and that's easier said than it's done. I know with my mother-in-law, she was a big woman and she slid out of bed. And it's like, my father, well, I'm not going to call the ambulance. I'll get Sid to pick her up. So I helped her in the bed, and then she fell on top of me on the bed. And I'm lying there. She starts laughing. I thought, I'm going to die in bed with my mother-in-law. So, but those little things
Funny
happen.
in the movies, not funny in real life, right?
No. So, but you never know. You be as prepared as possible. It's an old cliche, but it can happen at any time. So again, want to do this. It'll make your life. And again, it's the caregiver, the family member that's giving the care, that often is the person that's overlooked. The person needing the care, you usually know how to take care of them, but we have to take care of the caregivers themselves.
Indeed.
And that is so true. There are so many reports, and I'm not going to put more into the chat, but a number of studies and reports that show that the physical decline of caregivers happens maybe months, years after their duties have finished, because there is a level of stress, emotional stress, physical stress. You mentioned the getting in and out of bed. I feel so honored that I was able to take care of my mother, but I'm also very thankful that my mom was very tiny. By the time she passed, she was a mere 93 pounds. She was just skin and bones. She was a feather. So I was able to do those transfers from bed to walker to wheelchair to toileting options without hurting myself.
Right.
But we have to make sure that we are educating individuals ahead of time. So again, that idea of I'm going to pop this screen back up again. These concepts of learning, teach yourself early. And it's not just the physical aspect. For both of you, Heather and Sid, I want to loop back around to the financial aspects again, because we know how crucial that is in terms of caregiving. Heather, I want to start with you on this one, because again, you mentioned you're taking very specific steps in terms of your education because you know this is waiting for you. What would you advise others based on your experience, and talk through the lens of caring for your sister? Just how financially challenging is it to provide good, solid, loving care to a family member who needs help 24/7?
So I almost feel like this is an area where I haven't seen it clearly yet because it still is falling so much to my mom. And we are a family that's lucky to have financial resources. As I mentioned, my mom was an attorney, so she made a good living. She owns her home here in San Diego. So she's able to, provide what my sister needs, as well as enrichment activities. And we have done a lot of financial planning and estate planning. I recently became my sister's co-conservator so that I can oversee those things. I've also, in my mom's estate planning, because I'll be taking care of my sister, my mom is leaving me her home. So that is a huge sense of relief for me that I won't, my sister will have some place to stay, either there or in the home with my husband and I. But then there's financial considerations like, my mom's house isn't set up for someone that doesn't have a lot of physical mobility. So right now my sister's ambulatory, but as that declines, I don't know if that house, which is our childhood home, we've lived there our entire lives. My sister's lived there her entire life. She's comfortable there. I don't know if there's going to need to be home modification expenses that pop up there, or if my husband and I stay in our home, if this is where we'll be making some changes. So there's things like that you have to think about.
And I love that you let me rephrase that. I don't love that you have to go through this, but I am impressed, and I am very fortunate to have you sharing this information with others, that you have thought about all of these financial issues, including what does the house look like on the interior? How are who is listed as conservators and power of attorney? And, what happened, planning out to say, well, if this happens, XYZ is then in place. And so I applaud you for taking the lead on that. And Sid, I see you shaking your head yes, because your work as an insurance agent and financial planner, all too real what this means. Talk a little bit about your own experiences. You in our pre-meeting, you were sharing the dollar amounts.
Oh, the
And
dollar.
before we dive into that, I just want to remind people, remember, Medicare does not pay for private
No.
care in terms of in-home care or facility care for assisted living facility or memory care. Medicare does not cover that. So people need to understand that if you have someone come to your home to be a care worker, or you are in an assisted living facility for that care, that is private pay. So, Sid, with that as the preface, what was your experience, and why is it so important to plan, and what should people do?
Well, with my experience, I mentioned earlier, when my dad passed away, my sister and I grew up in Kentucky. We have a family farm. We did the estate planning, took it out of my mom's name. Of course, the biggest challenge with estate planning oftentimes is the family member that's aging itself, because they think, they read these horror stories about, oh my gosh, my kids are going to put me in a home and kick me out of my house. Not true. What we ended up, we set it up in the trust that she was there as long as she wanted, as long as she was alive. And so with my in-laws, we did the same thing. Again, we looked at different financial products for my in-laws. And, ironically, it was my mother-in-law who said, oh, this will never happen to me. We'll be fine. And they were fine, but it's financially, it drained their estate tremendously. I think I mentioned earlier, well over $200,000 a year for in-home health caregiving. And oftentimes when the aging parent is in a certain position, they're just there. The caregiver is oftentimes just a professional visitor, except for once every few hours. So it can be daunting. Of course, it was worth it to make sure that my father-in-law, my wife, and my sister-in-law did not overextend themselves, because that emotional aspect on the caregiver itself can oftentimes lead them to an illness. So it's very important, as Heather mentioned, do the estate planning, talk to the attorney. Fortunately, her mom was an attorney and had the legal acumen to know what to do.
Mhm.
And when you talk to an attorney, again, make sure they're an elder care attorney, an estate planning attorney. Don't discredit talking to a CPA also. I will say, when you're talking to an attorney, make sure they specialize in this type of care, estate planning and elder care, because I ran into a situation with one client. We're all set. My attorney did a will for us. It's like, you need more than a will. Well, once the father got sick, that attorney says, this is beyond my pay grade. You need to see an estate planning attorney. And at that time, it's often too late. That's what I see. So many people, it's not going to happen to me. We'll be okay. And by not wanting to get the training in caregiving or what to do, you're caught unprepared. And that's when the problems arise and the stress on the family happens.
Excellent information in terms of pre-planning. And you had shared with us that your costs were upwards of $200,000. Fortunately, you were in a situation that you had
And that's per
resources
year. That's
to handle
not
that,
for
right? Per
lifetime.
year,
That's
folks, per
annually.
year. So we do, I'd like to welcome one of our chat guests with us this morning, Simone, and thank you so much for being here on the chat. I love when I see your name pop up. And Simone, I'm going to share both of your comments so that we can see. You said that I'm taking care of my husband. Thank you for doing that for him. And soon my mom will be moving in with us, and I'll be taking care of her also. So we talked about that importance of pre-planning, of thinking, all right, how am I going to take care of myself while I also take care of my other loved ones? And looking for those resources. I believe we've chatted before, Simone, about, I think I asked you if your husband is military at all, to look at VA benefits to see if there are any available. There's also, and I'll put this in the chat, there's another platform that is, and this covers a lot of different services, benefits.gov. Across the board, this is every place in the country. I encourage you to go to benefits.gov and just spend some time sifting through. There's different programs for seniors, for children, rural, urban, agricultural, just across the board. Help for, perhaps you qualify for a program that helps you lower your utility bills, which frees up funding to have help someplace else. So a lot of times it's a matter of being creative, right? Sid, that we have to think
Absolutely.
about, maybe we plug the gap in space A that can help us with space B. So to that point,
And it's not too
Simone,
late.
spend your time digging around, looking for those extra resources.
Yes.
And then you had a specific question that I want to share. What does Medicaid cover? So again, I am not an attorney. And so I like to remind people, we talked about Medicare, right, which does not cover in-home care. Medicaid is the federally funded insurance that you qualify within certain frameworks. Some of it is financial, some of it is need. Medicaid does not, I believe, cover in-home care either. Now, if you are prescribed care through your doctor and you have Medicaid, there are frameworks of what may be covered, but it's not you picking up the phone, finding your own agency saying, hey, I'd like X person to come to the house to help me care for my family. That doesn't work that way.
And with Medicaid also, you mentioned the financial aspect. You pretty much have to be financial destitute. And it doesn't come if you're going into a nursing home. It's the state that does this. You could get a lien on your house. You could, you have to have, I believe, less than, depending on certain assets, $2,000 in assets. We had a client that her mom had a life insurance policy, and she was upset because the growth in the life insurance policy was below over $2,000, and she was going to lose her Medicaid support. So we had to take money out of it to keep it below that certain threshold. So Medicaid's there if you need it. It does provide you health care, in-home health care. Again, that's one thing. Before you do Medicaid or anything, it's important to talk to an elder care attorney. They can direct you in the right position, and they have knowledge of your local programs that you can take advantage of.
Yes, exactly. And while we've been chatting, did a little bit of online, and I'll just, this is straight from the Medicaid website. Eligibility requirements. Medicaid eligibility criteria vary from state to state. So that's key as well. Depending on where you live, some states have more robust programs than others. So I'll continue reading. Many states have expanded their Medicaid programs to cover more low-income adults. If you are unsure if you might qualify, you should apply. But again, to Sid's point, it's important to really understand all documents, all information before signing anything, because it's different from state to state. I believe California recently changed our eligibility requirements, and they are no longer tied to a very low asset threshold, which is wonderful. It's much higher, and it's not let's say you own a home that has assets. Previously, you would have been prevented from getting that care. I was on a call recently with one of the state agencies in my advocacy work, and someone asked the question, well, I earn too much to qualify, but I don't earn enough to pay private pay. What about all those folks in the middle? And sadly, that's most of us. That's a lot of us that are in that block. And so it's important to start researching early, early, early. I know it's tough stuff. You know, we may not want to think about it, but if you wait until you're in it, it's too late, because you are then overwhelmed. You have too much on your hands and you're just scrambling. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say there are a lot of wonderful, wonderful agencies and individuals doing work in this space who truly want to help people. The reality is that there are also a lot of people out there who are unscrupulous, and they simply see an opportunity to make money. I should say that both myself and Sid were both former news people, so we've covered stories like this. I know we have. It's not our imagination. Do your homework early. Make sure you're finding people that are doing this work for the right reasons, because they want to help. And Sid, you had a personal story about a caregiver. If you could share that with everybody so that they know we're not making this up.
No, you hear the horror stories, and we did go through this. One thing, when you check the agencies out, don't just go with the first one. As you said, Julia, check out several agencies, find the fit for you. But we had one caregiver. She was an excellent lady, but finding employees was very tough. So we brought in this one. We found out after we actually had some money missing, and fortunately the bad silverware was taken from my mother-in-law, but she was convicted of manslaughter, this lady was, and she had been arrested for drug dealing. So the caregiver itself was desperate in finding someone to work for them, and she didn't do her due diligence on hiring people. So whenever a new caregiver comes into your house, check them out, talk to them, get to know them some. Doesn't hurt to Google their name. You'll be surprised at what you'll find sometimes. So it does happen, as Julia said. Do your homework. Don't just say, oh, we found the first person. Talk to several agencies. Find out there and talk to people that have used those agencies too. Research is very valuable. And again, by not waiting till you actually need them, that puts you ahead of the game and less stressed.
Yeah, all good points. I'll share just a personal story to that point of checking out your caregivers. I was so blessed that the amazing women here in Northern California who helped me care for my mom in her last chapter, I'm still friends with them, and they were amazing to me and for my mom. But in the very beginning of this journey for me of understanding what I needed to do, I still lived in South Florida. And I remember one of the caregivers started, and there seemed to be a really good fit. My mom liked her, which was huge, right? And I had a conversation with that caregiver, and I said, listen, I am your employer, but I want you to establish this relationship with my mother. To your point, Sid, of being aware of the cognitive changes, I needed to employ that person to say, you're my eyes and ears to keep an eye on mom. I said, however, if mom ever tells me that you have done anything that is not completely up and up, I will come after you. Right? And her eyes got big. And I said, no, I'm just joking, but I'm serious. Right.
Yeah.
And then her eyes got big again. So I was joking, but I wasn't joking. We have to be those advocates. And look at it this way, for anybody who is thinking, there's too much talk about this caregiving thing. They're blowing it out of proportion. Never going to happen. Think about yourself. Think about your own future and ask yourself, what is the care that I would want if it's not a family member, if it's somebody else? How would I want to be treated? And then use that as your guide for who you want around you. And be that advocate. Be the voice that says, yes, family caregivers at agencies should earn more than somebody who's a private dog walker. Caregivers should earn more than someone at a fast food restaurant. They are taking care of your most precious assets, your family. So we have to be those voices.
If I can say one thing,
Yes, jump in.
one of the biggest things I see that as family members giving care and being there, you have to check your anger. It's so easy to get angry and resentful of the person you're giving the care to, because you're saying, why did this happen to me? And I've seen it. It's like, you have to realize the person receiving the care, while they may be your parent or a family member, they're still not 100% the person that you knew years ago. They're trying. I mean, I've seen my mom, she would repeat herself constantly with the same question every 10 seconds. And you just want to scream. But then you have to finally laugh about it and say, that's my mom. I love her dearly. She raised me. I'm going to be here for her as long as she is alive. And so you have to check your patience. You got to have patience and check your anger and resentment at the door, because it's so easy to. It's easy to say, why me? Why me? But I always take a deep breath. And it's, my wife, Dawn, when my mother-in-law would get angry with us because she wanted pudding instead of something else, and the doctor said no, she would take it out on us. And we found, we love you very much. And my sister-in-law would sometimes be combative, but finally we find, let's just walk out of the room and count to 10. It's that important, because they're not the person they used to be, but they're still there and you still love them dearly.
Yeah. And again, excellent point. It's a matter of, you guys have heard me say this. You don't have to take care of your loved one. You get to. And I had a friend tell me that, and it was the most powerful thing that I shared, or that I was told. And we're just about out of time. And I'm going to add Heather back in. We've had a little bit of visual issue, but we can still hear you, Heather.
Great. Yeah. So even though you can't see me, I'm nodding my head in agreement with everything you guys are saying. Julia, that's one of my mottos. I don't have to do this. I get to do this. And what you were saying, Sid, about finding things to put in your toolbox for managing the challenges of caring for people. Your whole thing, Julia, this whole keeping it real, because we love our family members, but they can drive us nuts. So some of the things that I have found have really helped me. And again, this is sort of the prep I'm doing for my later life, is because I see my mom struggle. I feel like sometimes her lifetime allotment of patience has depleted because she's been doing this for so long. I started mindfulness meditation years ago, and it literally transformed my life. So there's a great organization called Zen Caregiving, and they you can do online classes about mindful caregiving, and that it just sort of helps you pause a little bit when you're feeling overwhelmed, when your loved one has pushed all of your buttons. And if you can find a support group, I'm a member of, it's a private Facebook group for siblings of people with disabilities that I joined about 5 years ago. And that has been tremendous, because again, it's a place where people can vent about the struggles. It's a place where you can find resources, trying to there's a lot of talk there, Sid, about navigating the financial aspects. It's not enough to just talk to any old estate planning attorney. When you have someone with special needs, you need a special needs trust, which is a very different ball of wax. So yeah, getting enough sleep. If you can get enough sleep, that's always gonna sleep, laughter, and deep breaths. I feel like those are, if you have an adequate amount of those, you'll be doing okay.
I'm chuckling because I would routinely not have sleep. And I know, looking back, that's when I would it would take everything I had not to lose it. And I did lose it sometimes.
Of course.
So for all the caregivers out there, understand too, that sometimes that may happen, and don't feel bad about that. There's a lot that's going on. even without having a lot of interaction with chat in the chat box, we've reached our hour. So I'm going to keep my promise and make sure we wrap up. I put a couple of other resources into the chat box. Once this is saved onto Facebook, those links will still be in the chat so you can access them. And I encourage everybody to, again, go back through, spend some time looking at these items. That's really how you find those extra ways to help yourself. So I'm going to pop up some information. If you would like to reach out to Heather as a caregiver, fellow caregiver of a sibling, bounce ideas, maybe connect online, share resources. Here is the information. So I'm going to leave that up for a second or two if you would like to do that. Heather was kind enough to share that information. Oops, let's see what happened here. And then I am going to change this screen, and then I'm going to put Sid's information up. And if you have questions, personal sharing stories, knowing that he has been through it, knowing that he has had to navigate the financial planning for the family as well, feel free to reach out via email. Quite often I'm learning that it's a matter of you just want to find somebody else who's lived what you've lived and who gets it. And so that's a beautiful thing when that happens. And finally, I'm going to put up my information. Thank you, everybody, for your support in Keeping It Real Caregiving since I started this project. And again, if you're new to all of this, Keeping It Real Caregiving came about after taking care of my mother for almost 20 years, the last 5 being the heavy duty care. And I just know that as a journalist, I wanted to share what I had learned with others, and I wanted to then become an advocate, which I have. So feel free to email me. You can follow me on Facebook where you're seeing this. I also have a private Facebook group called Keeping It Real Caregiving, same name. You can find it online, send an invite. If everything checks out, I'll let you in. It is a private group because I found that people can be mean. So I wanted to keep it small and I wanted to keep it private. Sid, you're laughing at that. You probably know that's true to be the case. And check out the website, keepingitrealcaregiving.com. This is a one-woman effort. So I try to keep up to date on the news and post blogs and post resources. And if any of you would like to contribute, I'm always looking for guest essayists and writers, and I call it in your own words. Would love to hear from some of you and have you contribute. Share your stories, share your resources, share lessons learned, new programs. If you're a business or a service, as we head into 2024, I'll be offering branded content opportunities. So you can reach out to me for that. And yeah, so those are all my personal plugs for Keeping It Real Caregiving. And with that, I am going to come back into our guest. And Heather, even though we can't see you, I'm still going to pop your box up.
I'm
your
here.
voice is there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Sid Starks on the East Coast, thank you very much, sir. Heather Robert here in California, thank you very much. And
thank you so much.
I'm sure we will continue the advocacy work and make this whole caregiving world a little better. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is it for Keeping It Real Caregiving, our first Sunday coffee chat of 2024. This will be posted online. This will also be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the continued support. Every little bit helps, and I hope that you take care of yourself as you continue to take care of your loved ones. Have a great day, everybody. This is Julia Yarbough, and I'll see you next time.